What do you think about what is happening in Afghanistan? As an Afghan American, I cannot describe the emotions I feel. I am heartbroken seeing all of the civilians' lives lost and the many more that are displaced. The little family I have left in Afghanistan are in areas under Taliban control and they are completely at their mercy. However, the Afghan armed forces and the politicians didn't put up any fight. They all made hush deals for themselves and let the Taliban walk freely into the city headquarters. If the democratic government collapses in weeks after 20 years of nation building and $1 trillion of investment, it was clearly never going to get there. There was perhaps a case for going in to clear out Al-Qaeda after the 9/11 attacks, but we were there at least 17 years too long. I am glad Joe Biden has the balls to cut our losses, even through negative coverage. The answer, as cold-hearted as it may be, is for other countries to pull out and let them deal with their own problems. Over time the extremists will have children who are less extreme. Eventually there will be a schism between the extremists and the people we view as normal and compassionate. That will likely lead to a revolution and a regime change, likely with another bad, but better, government taking over. Over the course of the next century hopefully they'll improve on their own. We, as outside nations, can only do so much to change the extremists. At some point they need to handle themselves. Just my opinion anyways. The comments I am reading are mostly from an American political stance. I just watched a viral vid of the Taliban forcibly taking a screaming child for a bride. It was disturbing to put it mildly. Are we missing something here? Is this discussion regarding which president wanted out first? Is there any relief for the suffering in this country? If so, how? What's next? Is China going to have a go? Are sanctions going to ease the suffering? What a mess. Why is the solution to the strife for an intervention at all? Foreign intervention is why the Taliban and really any terrorist group in Afghanistan exists in the first place. ISIS and Al-Qaeda were trained by Americans, and you can imagine what the young men and boys in Afghanistan felt about the U.S. when their homes and schools were bombed by American jets to fight American-trained terrorist forces. Expected, yet terrifying, since they never defeated the Taliban, because they jumped borders and were able to hide in the mountains and hold choke points there, which are very difficult to pass and conquer. And now they are growing back in power, meaning that the threat in the world is increasing too. Also, a very important thing, help and protect the interpreters. They help the international forces to communicate. This means they also worked against the Taliban. The Taliban sees such thing as a reason to behead the interpreters and their families. We should really get all of them and their families out of their race up. Thank God we're fucking out. We should have left the moment Bin Laden's body turned cold, at the latest, and without invading Iraq, either. I'm in disbelief that there has been an entire generation born and is now in the workforce, and this country was in war for their entire lives. I feel for the Afghan people, and I say that we should treat those that want to leave the same way we treated the South Vietnamese that wanted to leave when we exited Vietnam. Give them prioritized refugee status and fast-track them to become American citizens. I actually like the take that we should have pulled out once Bin Laden was dead. Then the historical narrative becomes we will go to any lengths to hold responsible those who commit terror against civilians. And the US can walk away pretending it had exactly one goal with a defined ending. It wasn't a forever war. We needed to take down the top of the organization, etc. etc. Everyone could have said we did what we set out to do and all walked away. A month after he was dead we were stuck with no good exit point. There was nothing the US could really do. Honestly, we should have never invaded the area. Any government we put up was going to be hamstrung by the fact that people would know they report to the USA. Nobody wants to be ruled by a group that doesn't belong to them. So if Afghanistan wants to fix itself, it has to start on the inside. Unfortunately, there isn't enough will for that now. I feel bad for the innocents, but there was nothing the US could do. The Taliban is the local government in large areas. Edit. I also look at the poppy production, Bush's waning popularity, and a White House run by military contractor types. like the most powerful VP in U.S. history, Dick Cheney, as more catalysts for the war than anything else. 9/11 was just the spark. Original plan was an extremely limited military action only to go after the heads of then, we must defeat the Taliban. Then, nation building. The scope just grew and Bush and CO were just obsessed with the cause and nobody had any idea on how the US could ever extricate themselves. Ended up with decades of war and hundreds of thousands of lives lost, for nothing. Definitely never should have been there, and the time to get out was long ago. Your biggest problem is the fact that Afghan government troops are fighting under the rules of warfare while the Taliban don't. What that means is the government forces are taking Taliban prisoners and then feeding them while looking after them in a humane way. When the Taliban take over a city, they immediately release these prisoners who are in good physical condition that they are ready to join the fight. On the other hand, the Taliban don't follow any rules. When they take prisoners, they torture and kill them. Therefore, they don't have to waste resources on prisoners, and especially don't have to lose fighters to look after the prisoners. In Australia, they are prosecuting a soldier for killing someone who was only suspected of being in the Taliban. They told the Taliban where the Australian troops were and the Taliban killed 4 Australians from that info. BTW, in the Quran, Muhammad specifically had 20 rules that Muslims must follow in warfare. Cannot kill prisoners, cannot rape women etc. And the Taliban has broken every single rule on thousands of occasions, which leads me to believe that not even the Taliban are actually Muslim, they are just power-hungry dictators who use religion as an excuse. BTW, in the Quran, Muhammad specifically had 20 rules that Muslims must follow in warfare. Cannot kill prisoners, cannot rape women etc. Yeah. Except the Apostle of Allah, may peace be upon him, sent a military expedition to Wadis on the occasion of the Battle of Hunain. They met their enemy and fought with them. They defeated them and took them captives. Some of the companions of the Apostle of Allah, may peace be upon him, were reluctant to have intercourse with the female captives in the presence of their husbands who were unbelievers. So Allah, the Exalted, sent down the Quranic verse, Surah 4:24, and all married women are forbidden unto you save those captives whom your right hands possess. Abu Dawud 2150, also Muslim 3433. So you know? Also they're allowed. They would have taken out the Saudi royals who funded the whole show. Look, I hate KSA as much as anyone, but, 1, there are like 2,000 Saudi princes, none of whom would be easy to investigate and all of whom would be almost impossible to arrest and bring to justice. 2, the Taliban gave aid and comfort to OBL and AK, let's not pretend they were completely unrelated third party. 3, OBL and KSM literally planned and executed the attack. They were clearly the most culpable short of the pilots themselves. The proper response to 9/11 would have been to withdraw all troops from the Middle East, secure our borders and airspace, revamp our immigration system, invest in our digital and aerospace infrastructure, and generally bide our time while we reconsidered our role as the global superpower. My in-laws live in Afghanistan. They are kind, gentle, open people who have lived simple lives in relative safety. Each day brings another horrifying experience for my family. They've been bombed, a cousin has been beheaded, they've been shot at. They are scared for their college-educated daughters. Worst of all, there is absolutely no way to get out anymore. It's easy for anyone from Afghanistan to distance themselves from the situation by saying it was a waste of money, corrupt government, endless war, and the other propaganda that we spread around to make ourselves feel better about this situation. But the reality is that Afghans never had the money or resources to defend themselves against terrorists imported from another country, and a minimal military presence would have been just enough to preserve human rights and thousands of lives, if not substantially more. It was also reported by the Pentagon that there will be attacks on American soil in the near future because of this decision. This is a terrible decision that will likely end with us back in Afghanistan, but not after a huge loss of lives, a massive backslide in human rights. I was there from 2009 to 2011 as a contractor. I worked as a mechanic repairing MRAPs, Back then I could see that no real progress was being made. I think at this point it's obvious that war is a racket. There was never a realistic plan to win or even a definition of what victory would look like. That was never the point. The war machine is an integral part of the U.S. economy and culture. America as we know it wouldn't exist without it. We all have a hand in it. We all fund it and we all benefit from it. I've met so many people who make a decent middle-class career in the military-industrial complex. Where would those people be without the war machine? I made good money in it for a couple of years during the Great Recession. Do I feel guilty about it? Fuck number. I was born into this shithole of a country that is designed to make your life absolutely suck if you don't find a way to get some money. So I found a way to get some money. People do fucked up shit. It's fundamental to the human experience. You can rage against it and wring your hands over it, and people will still do fucked up shit. There is no solution. There's nothing we can or should do other than leave. The Afghan army outnumbers the Taliban 300,000 to 70,000. We trained them, gave them weapons, tried to build them a new government and a new country. We mediated peace talks while protecting villages and cities from invasion. We sacrificed our men and women to fight for their country. We built infrastructure, improved education, and made life bearable again. And if, after 20 years of doing all that, their country collapses back into Taliban rule in a matter of weeks, then so be it. We cannot indefinitely prop up a country that cannot or and will not stand on its own 2 feet. We've done all we can for the people there. Now their future is up to them. Knowing that there is probably going to be a war in nearby Uzbekistan and Tajikistan because of the water crisis, and that the people of those countries are tired of their governments, I'm afraid the Taliban may take control over the region. Tajikistan is the most religious of the ex-Soviet Union, so I guess the Taliban may take on them after Afghanistan. What I'm not sure is how will China react to this. Maybe ally with Taliban, though I doubt it, and maybe they'll want to erase them to gain influence. You're not sure? Well, China said if Kabul falls, China will recognize Taliban as the legitimate successor. The point is not all about domestic threat impact on China. The issues are China seeing Taliban is a method to establish peace and stability in the region. Please keep this in mind. China's role has always been on subject of humanitarian and peace talks. Sound hilarious coming from a country that were repeatedly attacked by nations all over the world for their treatment of the Uyghurs. Indeed, the Uyghurs is a frequent topic between them and the Taliban during diplomatic talks. China already demanded the Taliban to cut ties with the Uyghurs fighters, a demand that I don't think the Taliban can fulfill. Either way, for China it's never about the military industry. They simply holding back, wait for the firefight to end, recognize the Taliban and discuss about Afghanistan's economy, sweet mineral trade. They know the real treasure is not the Taliban. Oh, don't forget the undiscovered oil and natural gas. Money talks. It was a lot more justifiable than Iraq. It was also much more multilateral than Iraq. Out of 519 U.S. congressmen, 1 voted against it, because she thought the mandate was too broad. All of NATO went in there. The UN Security Council, famous for stalemating as world powers vetoed, provided no resistance and even cooperated. It was just a given. In reality, perhaps a special forces operation to take out only bin Laden was more warranted. People point out that the terrorists who did 9/11 were largely Saudi, but they were all trained in Afghanistan, and bin Laden set up Al-Qaeda there, all with the knowledge and consent of the Taliban government. Gensers might also be unaware of precisely how much of a shock 9/11 was. In 2000 we thought of terrorism about as much as we did pandemics in 2019. There wasn't even an argument against invasion. There was just this feeling terrorists could do anything now, that the mass death of 3,000 people in a day was just the start, and this had to be stopped. There was also this philosophy coming out of the wave of democratization in the 90s, and maybe the successful NATO intervention in the Balkans, that all you really had to do to set up a stable democracy was overthrow the tyrants and let the people take charge. It was just a given Afghanistan would be invaded. People figured Iraq might be next. This was more contentious. followed by America using its influence to just liberate the Arab world and let people naturally democratize. The reality is that it's not that simple. A lot of people just want to fight to set up their own dictatorships. Most people in Afghanistan are okay with the Taliban. Before you downvote, it's true. People in Afghanistan are usually people who fled Afghanistan and were raised in the U.S., hence liking Western values more. The average Afghan man who has never had the presence of government be anything more than a nuisance due to corrupt officials asking for bribes is the reason why they support the Taliban. Sharia law is already acceptable among the majority rural of Afghan and the slim majority of this small urban population. There will be no difference to the Afghan who will live as how they did 50-70 years ago. Only the urbanites, particularly females, LGBT and academics, along with members of the government, will have a substantial decline in life. Life won't get better for people from Afghanistan, but it's not like their lives were going downhill from before Taliban rule. America just gotta go back to being isolationist. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. When asked to police the world, you got to stop the vested interests of big business deciding your foreign policy. Simplifying, I'm a great believer in just leaving these countries to sort their own mess. In time, although it takes a lot of pain and misery, it gets resolved because the long-suffering silent majority say enough is enough. Stop trying to impose your values on a country that don't understand those values. And it's not as if this is a fucking surprise. You'd think you'd learn from the past, but nope, it's just rinse and repeat. I live in Iran. I can't believe in modern and democratic countries and societies. There's a law to protect Islam, and you call it Islamophobia. Man, listen to me. You see water, I see the thunder. You see wind, I see the hurricane. Islam has this power to destroy all the humanity. Look what happened in Middle Eastern history. Islamophobia is like you motherfuckers tried to protect of Nazism. Plaza, get it. I don't want to say use violence to Muslims. I want to say be careful about this idea. All of shit that happened in Iran, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, the whole of responsibility is on the fucking Islam. Eat it. P.S. Can you hear me, bitch? To be clear, Islam is ideology that dangerous more than Nazism. No foreign power has been able to conquer that region in modern history. The lack of internal connectivity and ultra-conservative values of many who lived there made it all but inevitable that they would fall back to how it was before. The only way Afghanistan will change is if enough people there have the will and the means to stand against the Taliban on their own. I just don't think there is enough political will in that country to resist. There is a great real-life lore video about it. https://b/ab9zkh4_y. You have the watches but we have the time. Taliban saying. And so that's probably the most accurate thing about the place. America got it in its head that we're an empire now, was the way Dick Cheney was said to have expressed it. Truth is, Benjamin Franklin was right. We're a republic for as long as we can keep it. And with our newfound love of fascism and evangelical degeneracy, it's fair to say American empire isn't looking too healthy. It's fair to say that Russian and Chinese influence via social media was an Achilles heel to our domestic stability, and the repeated iterations of know-nothing, do-nothing presidents on the subject, from President Bush to President Obama, President Trump and now President Biden, both parties over 20 years have had a turn at this wheel and neither was especially effective. While it's heartening to a Western eye, as it might be to see stories of and pictures of girls and young women vote, or get elected to parliament, the society in which this occurs might well be thought of in terms of Western history as tribal and most definitely pre-Enlightenment. So 600 years ago, there were women in power, but they were few and far between. Queen Elizabeth I, Empress Theodora, Queen Isabella, were a woman to rise to power. The brutality of the local political landscape dictates someone resembling more Cersei of Westeros than Merkel of Germany. In that way, none of the underpinnings of a more modern society are present. Sure, the people like cell phones and laptops, but if they aren't willing to stand up to people who want to impose all manner of religious absurdities upon them, then it's not as if it's the calling of the United States or any other power to bring them out of it. When I was a child, I often thought a benevolent United Nations would solve all the world's problems, and then after seeing famines in Ethiopia and elsewhere, and refugee situations throughout other places around the world, it's fair to say the local people need to fight to maintain their circumstance. As with other rump states, Afghanistan, Israel, Saudi Arabia, North and South Korea, Taiwan and elsewhere, if one removes the external supports, it's certain all these other nation-states would immediately be beset by the problems that billions or trillions of dollars simply delayed. How rapidly would any one of these states rapidly work to make amends with their neighbors under peril of being swept into the ash bin of history? War, it turns out, is a rich man's game played by poor people driven to desperation over a certain amount of unfocused money, and it seems what gets lost in the shuffle is actually solving the problems in hand. I suspect this goes for anything where countries are not actually providing services for their citizens.